Hey, everybody. Welcome to Idio Talk, an Apple podcast. I am Walker Glenn.
I'm Zach Glenn.
Hey, Zach. How you doing?
I'm fantastic.
It's really great to welcome listeners to episode 2 of our second season. This is a podcast where Zach and I talk about music that we're both really into. Our first season was about Radiohead. If you're just jumping in now because you're a fan of the artist we're covering this season, go back, listen to the Radiohead season. It will give you more than you ever knew about Radiohead if you are not yet a fan. And if you are a fan, I'd like to think that we did a pretty good job of covering everything that's relevant. This season, we are talking about the discography of Fiona Apple. Last week, we covered just kind of her background as a person and artist and our backgrounds as fans of her work. This week, we are getting into her debut album, Tidal. And that's why I somewhat cheekily gave us the subtitle of Idio Talk, an Apple podcast. I do want to say that we are not officially affiliated with Tim Apple. Or do you remember that when Donald Trump called Tim Cook Tim Apple?
No.
Yeah. You don't remember that? That was one of his.
I'm loving doing the show. All the Trump memories you're peppering in. I think last season, what you blew my mind with was when he said, "I am a very stable genius."
That was an amazing one. That was on Twitter. The Tim Apple one was on a hot mic. Oh my God, dude, too. He just also recently not tweeted because he's not on Twitter. He's on Truth Social, but on his which, you know, at this point may be functioning better than Twitter. Who knows? But on Truth Social, he put out a picture of Chris Christie splayed out asleep and wrote, taking a much deserved break after another hard 25 minutes of work. You know, look, I've made no secret
Trump was funny?
I mean, this is what I was going to say is I have made no secret of I am staunchly opposed to just about everything that man stands for. But God sometimes he's often funny, seemingly accidentally. And I would say he's almost as frequently funny on purpose, even though
that's really funny.
Yeah, you know, I hope eventually he is exiled from our country and society at large. But in any case, even though I am subtitling Idio Talk, an Apple podcast is a little bit of a play on words for both Fiona Apple and the app that our podcast is most frequently listened to on. I have an alternate subtitle for our podcast this season. Would you like to hear it, Zach?
Please, yeah.
And this is up for second drafts if you can improve on this. But so Idio Talk, an Apple podcast, or when the pod hits the pod app, it plays like a king. What it says every ep when it goes on the cloud, and you'll hear the whole thing before you let your phone ring. There's no podcast that's better when you're tuned in tonight. So when you have headphones, you choose your own cast, and remember that Glens are the greatest of hosts. And if you listen too fast, then you'll miss all the jokes. But if you wait, it won't matter because it's in your downloads. Now, folks of which I doubt there are too many, but folks who are learning about Fiona Apple from the first time from Idio Talk don't get what I'm doing there, but you obviously do, and I have a feeling a lot of our listeners probably do too. It's not something we've covered yet, and it's not something we're covering this episode, but that is a play on a future to-be covered Fiona Apple album title.
Yes.
I do not know that I stuck to the exact rhyme scheme of the original poem, but
really iambic pentameter, very close rhythmically.
I made sure to keep all the syllables the same.
Wow, nice job, man.
But there are some. It's a strange kind of non-repeating rhyme scheme in the original poem, so I don't know if I got that exactly, but I did my best.
I loved it. That was fantastic.
So sign off on this.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, I knew that when we were covering Fiona Apple that there were going to be some stylistic adjustments. We talked about it in we talked about it the entire season, but I know that we really started to hit on it in our OK Computer episode covering the band Radiohead, that Tom York doesn't even bother to rhyme a lot of the time. And I'm not going to say that Fiona Apple, well, of course I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me that she, especially in albums following this one, so I will use brevity, and something that Fiona Apple doesn't seem to love to do. But, I don't know. The poetic nature, I guess all songwriting is poetry in a sense, but like the poetic nature that she seems to really lean into in upcoming albums is, I would say, a differentiator and something that I really, really like. And I don't want to jump ahead, but we'll talk about it. Just, I think what Fiona Apple and a lot of artists have in common, in the shared DNA of musical artists that we love, is just a phenomenal songwriter and lyricist. And I'm talking specifically about the lyrics, right? Because she obviously composes a lot of the arrangements and everything while not being overly gratuitous. And I don't know how one strikes that balance. I think it's a bit of a magic trick. And obviously there are people in which the songs of Tom York or Fiona Apple or whomever do not resonate. And I understand that. But I'm going to go ahead and stop there because there was kind of a lot of thoughts flying around there. But do you have anything to add on that?
I think it is I believe I said last episode, I think there's going to be, for me, a lot of Radiohead comparisons, and it's only because that's the other thing that we covered, right?
Yes.
It's interesting noting the differences that come up covering a different artist. There's really obvious ones, the gender, solo artist versus band, right? Totally. Those are not necessarily that interesting. It's what is interesting to me is to find out, this thing that Zach and I love enough to do our second season about, right?
Yeah.
So it's up there with Radiohead. Is so different in its musical and lyrical approach. And that is one I've been thinking a lot about listening to her debut album is she's a much wordier songwriter with a much more expansive vocabulary. And I agree with you. It's not overwrought. It doesn't feel overwritten or like too much
cheesy.
Of a good thing. No. No, it doesn't, and it doesn't feel like for the sake of being long. No. It's these songs have a lot to say, and it's a very different approach than what I feel like Tom York does. Primarily, not all the time, but which is invoke a feeling with very minimal lyrics, and this is more like it just drills down into tons of specific ways to convey an emotion or a feeling. And I agree with you. It's very poetic. And also I do think she rhymes more than she doesn't.
She does. And it reminds me too of how we were talking about in our first episode, a lot of the, I think, respect that we have accumulated. I don't know if that's the right word. A lot of the respect that we have for Fiona Apple as an individual, given the interviews, the things that she was unapologetically unafraid to say as a young person. Yes, of course. But also I think just within the songs themselves, there's a huge degree of confidence and so forth. I think what stands out to me is that it does not feel as though somebody opened up a thesaurus and wrote tracks that way. And I would say maybe on a different end of the spectrum that we're talking about is, and I'm not here to throw shade. We've talked about the silliness of some bands like Limp Bizkit or Nickelback or whatever, but a band that I know that you and I used to hold a great affection for, AFI, their lead singer.
I knew that's where you were going.
Yeah, so that I'm not saying, I'm not sure Davey Havok's actual real name, but the singer of that band, I'm not saying that he is not an intelligent individual. He very well probably is, rather, right? But his lyrics, though, do feel like it's like, all right, I'm in the A's today. What can I?
Sure.
And also, too, I will say I learned as a young teenager who was very into the band AFI, I did learn some words that I think are rather cool from their songs. So it's not as if it's without impact or without value. I just think as you kind of age into things and are looking for some authenticity, however that manifests itself to you, it's really cool. And then I would say just really quickly, just a little, I would say somebody who kind of splits the difference between that is a lyricist who I also love, who does feel like he uses a thesaurus, but is sort of unabashed about it, who would be Cedric Bixler Zavala from the Mars Volta. He has said, a lot of their songs are written in a hybridized, he's completely fluent in Spanish. But are written in this fun hybridized English, Spanish, and then a lot of really grotesque imagery. And he has said unabashed,
and also like a fair amount of made up Spanish too, right?
Yes. Yeah, and for what this all just centers back to on subjectivity, listeners. So I'm not saying any of these are better, but I would just say I really like the way he splits the difference between like, yeah, I had all these ideas or no idea, and I wrote something, and I think there's a level of authenticity to it. So kind of pushing Davey Havoc and that criticism aside, I don't want this podcast to become just teasing people that have had far more success than I have, but I think you understand my meaning. And
no, I do.
Yeah.
Say there's not a right or a wrong way. It's just people. You got to say what you have to say in your voice, and Fiona's voice.
She feels like she says it in her voice, big time.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
And I will say one thing that has surprised me about Tidal, an album I was very familiar with, but as with every album that we've covered on Idio Talk, you listen in such a concentrated dose with the knowledge that you're going to speak about it. New things jump out, or you notice things that you just kind of took for granted. I find it very interesting how long all of the songs are on an album that was not only a debut, but was released as a pop radio album, and that most of the songs are close to or above the 5-minute mark, which I think is a cool and kind of unorthodox choice.
Yeah.
If it even was a choice. The thing is I feel like her music is so her that it's just like the songs are what they are, and this is how they came out. But similarly to there being a lot of lyrics, there's a lot of verses in these songs too. And almost everyone has a bridge, and
not just constant repetition within those verses either. I mean, there is something, one of the things that I love so much that we got a chance to talk about within our first season, kind of leading up to, but certainly a lot more afterwards, our conversation with Dr. Brad Osborne, who wrote the wonderful book, Everything in Its Right Place, Analyzing Radiohead, was just thinking about song structure. Is this song through composed? Is this song, does it have a terminal climax or whatever? Listeners, please go back and listen to that episode. Really, really, really interesting stuff that Walker and I both learned a ton from. I was thinking about on listening to this album, as I do a lot of music now when I listen to it, like, okay, so what do we got going on here? Now, a lot of that, most of the songs are verse chorus, even if they're in more of a ballad form. But one thing that I really like, and we'll talk about this as we listen to the songs, is that even when Fiona closes out a song with a final chorus, it never feels, it doesn't feel excessive. Like, oh, we just got to listen to the chorus one more time. She does something very interesting, I think, to close out a repeated chorus, which any good musician is going to do. I'm not saying that when other bands do that, it's boring or something like that. But we are getting into the song content. But just real quick, one other thing you said, and this goes back to our last episode, how Fiona was potentially planning to sell these songs for another artist to use, right? As is super common in the industry. I do wonder if she wrote them with such breadth with the idea that somebody else would edit them down. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't. That's an interesting speculation. I could see that. I could see that. I haven't heard anything about that, but I think that it's great that we're talking about the album in kind of generalities a little bit up top. And the one thing that you said that hooked me was that even these songs are the structurally they're pretty traditional, right? Which is not a knock. It's just there are people who cannot help but be they are so thoroughly themselves in their approach to the art they're making that I think Fiona Apple might be one of those artists who couldn't be boring if she tried. Because I don't want to say what song it is, but there's a song on here that is a big pop hit that was not one of the ones that she originally brought to the sessions that she was asked to write. And that she knocked off in a short amount of time. And it's like, it's been stuck in my head for 2 weeks straight. It's extremely catchy, but I would not be like, oh yeah, another fucking boring, hacky radio song. And so
it's got a really,
gonna have
really
a lot of
trippy chord progression for sure.
Yeah, there are just people, Prince is another one for me who I would invoke, where it's just like he can and did write many hits that anybody can get into and that you can play on the radio over the decades, but you're never like, who is this? It sounds, this just sounds like everybody. You're always like, oh, it's Prince. I know, because nobody else sounds like this, because he is a beautiful weirdo. And I think we're covering a beautiful weirdo this season.
John Lennon too, I did not realize the profound
who I hear some
influence.
Strong traces of on this debut.
Yes, big time. I was thinking about songs like Across the Universe or Strawberry Fields Forever, Strawberry Fields Forever. Just, I mean, those, the latter of which being a crown jewel in Lennon's catalog, I would say. I'm not saying it's his best or my favorite, but man, oh man, is that song an accomplishment. Yeah, just sort of the disconnected but very interconnected nature of Lennon crown jewels is really a strong influence that I hear in Fiona Apple's catalog. Now, I do want to disclose up top, I said in our last episode that Maya Angelou is somebody who I really intend to familiarize myself with, who Fiona Apple claims is an incredibly strong influence. Now, just in the interest of honesty and hopefully the Fiona Apple fans that are in lockstep with us in terms of knowledge or research or not, I still do have a little bit of work to do in that regard. So I don't mean to short shrift somebody that is the most important in Fiona Apple's influence, but I just want to be forthcoming about that. And I just think it's important, you know what I'm saying? Rather than acting like we're doing the most comprehensive in-depth coverage just for myself, for Zach Glenn. I'm still not quite there yet, but I plan to. I don't know
I
how
read
you
a
want to handle
collection
that
of
in
her
the edit,
poetry
Walker.
I've read one book by Maya Angelou, is a collection of her poetry called And Still
terrific.
I Rise. And I love that you want to do your homework, and I encourage us both to. Having said that, the fact that I have read a book of her poetry is not providing me with any particularly helpful insight at this moment, except that, again, one thing that's great about covering Fiona Apple is that there is a lot about her process and her approach to music and how she feels about, all the topics that she covers in her music. There's a lot of that in her own words, and her connection to Maya Angelou is something that, she discussed a lot in interviews about this album. And in the liner notes, I believe it says, thank you to Maya Angelou for everything you've ever written, something to that effect. So,
and her autobiography, When the Caged Bird Sings, I just love that,
which
so
is
beautiful.
I think would be considered her most famous work, and I have not read, but I would love to, and maybe we can both do that over the course of this season.
Terrific.
Well, Zach, I'm very glad that we covered a little bit about the album and the topic at hand up top, because we're going to get into it on a more granular level here. But I wanted to talk to you about something decidedly stupider that has, and I'm going to say, has nothing to do with Fiona Apple. So what I wanted to bring to you is basically kind of your weigh in on an ongoing vigorous argument and debate that has taken place in my life. And this goes all the way back to an episode that we did last season, one of our movie episodes. And I had intended to bring this to the table as a topic of discussion at that time. But ultimately, we had so much to say about Batman Forever that it just would have derailed us and was never brought up. But it specifically is an argument that I've had on an ongoing basis with our guest that episode, Nicole Love. I encourage listeners, if they didn't, a lot of our listeners do check out our movie episodes, but there's a lot of people who only listen to the music episodes. And I just want to give some light encouragement that if you're a fan of us and this podcast, even if you think, oh, I don't care about this movie that they're covering, I think that you'll enjoy them. We have a lot of fun doing those episodes.
We think we did a great job.
Yeah, we love them. we're like huge fans of our shit. But on the Batman Forever episode, I had wanted to bring this up. And like I said, the time was not right. All three of us had a lot to say about Batman Forever. But Nicole and I have had this ongoing argument. And I don't remember how it started, but I know it
Not Nicole Kidman.
Not Nicole Kidman, but Nicole Love, who was a guest on our Batman Forever episode. Sure. We felt it was important to have Nicole representation in the Nicole Kidman starring vehicle, Batman Forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Here's what I'm about to lay on you. Your insight would be very appreciated. Any questions or additional layers of this that you see would be very, very helpful. I also feel that even though we're brothers, and you could be biased to take my side, you also have a good friendship with Nicole, and I trust your ability to be objective about this. Okay.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's a huge
I don't know where this started, but I have become convinced that the only reason farts are socially embarrassing. Not where you thought I was going.
No.
The only reason that farts are funny is because they're embarrassing. The only reason they're embarrassing is because of shame about our bodies, right? Like a lot of comedy comes from things that we are uncomfortable with or have shame about.
Yeah.
Farts are one of those things. Picture, if you would, a world where farts do not smell and have never smelled. So this isn't like tomorrow we change everything we know about farts. It's just going back to the beginning of human history. Our association with them is different. They still make the noise, right? And it's still a somewhat involuntary bodily function. But I say, if farts did not stink, they would only be as much of a social faux pas as a sneeze or a cough, i.e., something that you don't, want to have a fit of, something that you say, excuse me, regarding, but there's not additional social embarrassment. It's just the only reason we think the sound is funny is because of its association with a rotten smell, which causes embarrassment. Now, Nicole thinks I'm crazy, and that because of it's both the exit that it comes from your butt, right?
That was I'm holding questions, so yeah, that was going to be my rebuttal. But
yes, I just want to try to lay out kind of the arguments clearly.
Continue.
That
I'll hold
both,
any comments.
The objections to this are that it would still be embarrassing because it comes from your butt, and that the sound is funnier than a cough or a sneeze. I have my rebuttals to these objections, but I would like to now open the floor to you and find out what you think about this and if you can help get to the bottom of this argument. Pun not intended.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really interesting premise. Like, I think there's a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival to your kind of foundation in that I do think comparing them to a sneeze is apt, and that they would probably fall more into that camp, where it's like we still laugh at people sneezing if it's a good enough series of or whatever, or exaggerated enough or something like that. But where I think this runs into trouble is that a fart is still associated with your gastrointestinal region, which is still going to be where you evacuate your bowels, even in this artificial world, correct?
Yes, we still poop in the world where farts don't smell.
Yeah, so I think it's like you could make the argument. I think it would be more like burping, right? Because burping is gross. I think that like, in conversation, even on a date, if I go, oh, excuse me, and I don't open my mouth, but it's obvious that I don't think that's going to ruin the date, right? And I'm talking, I wish there was a visual component, but just hold my fingers up to my mouth, keep my lips closed and go and intimate a swallow. I think that the average person can be like, oh, it was you know what I'm saying? And that's not impolite. It's actually polite to acknowledge and go, oh, excuse me. But I feel like in this world, though, where farts don't stink, they're not the same as a sneeze. They're the same as a burp, even though, okay, but because burps don't always smell, but because of like,
but it's
a burp
rude.
Is
You're saying it's still rude.
It's rude, and a burp, and like you might not think of farts as much associated to poop or something like that in this world because they don't stink. But a burp is much closer to vomiting, which is why it's gross and rude, than say sneezing is, right? So that's why I think sneezing is not, and why we still, when we need to burp, or if we have children, why I said, no, honey, you don't just burp whenever you feel like it or whatever, is I think that's kind of what it would be more analogous to, because burps don't really smell unless you're like really close to the person. Anywho, it's sort of so I think, I'm per usual, I'm straddling that line. I'm kind of right down the middle.
Well, I want to just immediately compliment you and say this has been. So first of all, Nicole and I don't like discuss this day and night or anything, but it has not been able to come up in conversation without it being like a minimum 25-minute back and forth. And this burp angle has not been brought up by anyone. So I think this is a very interesting new element that you're introducing to the debate. And by the way, like I consider this, whether I'm wrong or right, just the amount of conversation this has generated, like I want to toot my own horn and say, I want this to be a thought experiment on board with like the trolley problem. Like I think that this is something that as Kevin Spacey said in Seven, will be puzzled over and studied for years to come. This is my John Doe. What's in the box? This is like the leg. But
do you have the upper hand though? That's the thing.
I think that I have the upper hand because I'm willing, like John Doe, I am willing to die for the work that I'm doing. I believe in it that much.
Can I just ask who's Brad Pitt and who is Morgan Freeman?
Nicole Kidman. Nicole is definitely Brad Pitt. Because I should say she's like really like thinks that I am out of my mind. Yes, exactly. She has cool spiky hair. No, like she's like been pretty firm on like, and she's not, and I want to be clear, like she has not simply like dismissed my premise as crazy, but she objects to it, and for very well articulated reasons that maybe we'll have to loop her back in on this because this is part of why I wanted to discuss it on the Batman Forever episode. But I did say I was going to bring this up on the podcast, and I'm going to really do my best to represent your side of the argument well. But she's definitely Brad Pitt, and you are definitely Morgan Freeman, and I am definitely John Doe because I've gone quite mad, and I'm enjoying the muck that I'm playing. There's nothing wrong with the man enjoying his work.
You're looking at Fiona Apple. You're looking at Nicole going, become wrath.
Yeah, become farts that don't stink. I do think also Seven Rules. I just rewatched it, and it's
me too.
It's my third favorite David Fincher movie, and I really really love the other two. My first two would
Zodiac.
Yes.
And Fight Club?
No, Gone Girl is my favorite.
Oh.
I know that it's like not like I know that it's not the movie he's made that necessarily has the most depth, but I just think it is so perfectly executed in its watchability and its performances, and it's kind of like how it takes like a pretty implausible set of events and grounds them, makes it like I don't question it for a moment when I watch it.
The scene where Neil Patrick Harris's body is discovered is very much Seven, the supermodel with the face, in terms of its stylization.
Totally. Which I would say is also where Seven is really successful for me too, is it takes an incredibly implausible set of events and circumstances, and you're like, you sold me. I got it
better than any movie like that, I think.
Yeah, but I know it's like it's a maybe a little bit of like a basic bro pick in terms of it like not being like the most I don't know, not necessarily being the smartest movie ever made, but I think
Seven
it is
fucking rules.
Yeah, I love Seven, but
you're talking about Gone Girl. Sorry.
Yeah, but Gone Girl is my favorite, and I have kind of like a weird, maybe not weird, but like I feel a strange kinship and affinity with Ben Affleck, and him playing that particular breed of asshole that he is in Gone Girl to me is like some of the best casting. Like up there with like Jack Nicholson in The Shining, is it's just like this is the role this guy was, that face and attitude he was like born to play. Anyway, so I'm John Doe. This is this will be puzzled over for generations. You have really found, like Morgan Freeman, we're going to stick with the Seven metaphor, like Morgan Freeman in the library. Exactly. Well, I was going to say in the library, pulling up the Divine Comedy and Dante and all that stuff, right? You are now bringing this burp aspect to the whole thing,
right?
Which is, I got to say, a pretty compelling argument that it's somewhere in between the rudeness or embarrassment of a sneeze and what farts currently are as a social faux pas. Because my thing is, I also put this on Reddit, I should say. I put it on the Reddit community, Subtle an Argument. The feedback, first of all, got a lot of engagement.
I was just going to ask, how's the engagement?
The engagement is great. Not a single person agrees with me. Every single person is like, no, they would still be embarrassing because they come out of your ass. My thing is, I just think that everybody who I present this to is having trouble adjusting their mindset to a world where farts have never stunk, because I think that we would compartmentalize the fact that we expel waste out of our asses if farts didn't have the unpleasant association with that. I just think, because it's like, it's also embarrassing to blow snot everywhere, right? Or like to have like a runny nose or something, like, or to pick your nose. Yes. But it's like, if you sneeze and are polite about it, it's no big deal. And
sneezes are largely involuntary, though, is the thing. And that's why I think the burping, and I'm not saying you're not giving my burping comparison the proper credence. I appreciate how much of an additional wild card this is thrown in. But I think everyone to just instantly dismiss via Reddit is wrong, but I think that sometimes it's harder to articulate the nuances in text, even in something that's really well written, as we all know, in a text form, I should say. But sneezing is largely involuntary, and like burping, I think farting is largely voluntary. Largely, again, not always, right? Obviously, there are times when things happen. But by and large, I feel like it's like burping. So that's kind of where I think the differences lie. But
haven't you been? I mean, this is also just like, man, like I hate my human body sometimes. I mean, like, sure, it's voluntary, right? But it's like it is the embarrassment and the rudeness of it all, because, my God, haven't you been in a situation where it's just like, it feels so unfair that I can't fart right now?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is whatever, just public. It's just like, this is torturous how bad my body needs to do this thing right now that I can't do.
Yeah.
But of course, it's also like, I guess I could also say, why are we not allowed to like drop our pants and take a piss or shit in public too?
No, it's not the same at all. It's not the same.
But
It's not the same.
I wanna bring up the Reddit post because, okay, first of all, I'll post the Reddit thread in the show notes, and listeners, if you're on Reddit, we'd love to get in there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. People they didn't dismiss, they made good faith arguments, as has Nicole.
Good. Okay.
But it's just no one agrees with me. The closest to agreement that I've gotten is you saying it's more akin to a burp, and then there was a very interesting new insight brought on Reddit that I thought was favorable for me. But it was, people were arguing with me, and I would kind of come back with a counterpoint. But I got to tell you too, at a certain point, I didn't want to argue for this too hard, because I'm like, at what point are people going to think I'm just some sort of like fart fetishist who like needs this to be true? Because I'm just like, I don't want to like.
But Walker, your John
because
Doe
also my
manifestation-
Reddit name is my name, Walker JF Glenn.
I know. Well, you're already John Doeing yourself though, because people are talking about this for years to come.
That's
Or at
true.
least weeks so far. I don't know how long ago you posted it.
Do you want to hear some of the
Yes, I would
comments?
love to. Please.
Okay. Should I read my post too, or is my argument made clearly enough?
I think it's fine as a reset. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is on the Reddit community. Settle this for me.
Good
Title of the
community.
post is Argument with GF About Farts. So I said, my GF,
Wait,
and
GF
I-
is for Godfather, right?
Yes, that's right. Nicole Love is my godfather.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, what is it? If mom and dad pass away, she has to raise me. I could do a lot worse. She's a great lady. So my girlfriend and I have a long-running argument about if farts would still be embarrassing / funny if they didn't stink. My position is that if farts didn't smell bad, they would only be as socially embarrassing as a sneeze, i.e. an involuntary bodily action warranting an excuse me, but carrying no real social shame. She contends farts would still be embarrassing / funny even if they didn't stink. That sound coming out of your butt is funny in itself. My response is that the butt is only funny because of its association with things smelling bad. An involuntary sound from one's butt would be no more embarrassing than an involuntary sound from one's nose or
I
mouth.
don't agree with that.
If it did not have it, no one does. If it did not have an unpleasant smell attached to it. Too long didn't read. Would farts still be funny if they didn't stink? So first
You put
person,
that at the bottom?
yeah, that's how you do it.
Well, yeah, but I just picture Reddit though. It already cuts off posts that are too long though, so they have to get all the way.
Well, look,
through
it hasn't hurt the engagement. We've got 11 upvotes and 15.
Okay.
And I got to say, there's a lot of people in this community, but I scrolled through and not a lot of posts have more than 2 or 3 upvotes. So
No, not at all. That's like akin to like a 55 upvote on like a music cover or something like that.
Yeah, this is captured the zeitgeist over on Reddit /Settle This for me. Continuing to elevate my celebrity status on Reddit, although maybe in not a great way on this one. Like I was, as I was writing this, just like, is this going to be the thing that like gets me canceled 10 years from now, where it's like, maybe I finally like achieve some like notoriety or success as a podcaster or comedian or writer. And then it's like, hey, and then it's like, it's like one day I'm the main character on Twitter. It's like hashtag fart dad or like fart smelling dad.
The main character on Twitter.
That's what they say. You've never heard. That's not an original. They say you never want to be the main. Yeah, it's like you never want to be the main character on Twitter. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so this first person says, yes, I think they would. It's from the butt. And I said, but why would the butt be funny in a reality where farts don't smell? I don't think the anal orifice is inherently any funnier than any hole in our body. And then somebody said,
I disagree. Yeah,
I
disagree with that.
Well, speak on it.
Well, no, we already covered it. I mean, it's just like I don't think the anal orifice is inherently funnier, but I think its association would still remain even if farts didn't stink because of what its primary connection to your large intestine.
And yes, and this is an area where when I discussed this with Nicole last, which was yesterday, she pushed back on my framing that she's saying that the butt is inherently funny. And she's saying it's not that it's inherently funny, it's that it is a private part, and private parts we have more discomfort and shame around, which is where the comedy and embarrassment comes from. So I do want to clarify her position on that.
Sure.
Which is hard to argue with. I just still think in my reality that we would be able to compartmentalize the butt's functions the same way we because also
we already compartmentalize. Our mother had one of the funniest things I've ever heard her say. This was like 15 years ago minimum. I had a acquaintance at the time who would come over a lot, who would constantly stare at our sister's ass and not be
I don't know about
not be sly about it at all. And our mom was just complaining about it to me. She's like, honey, I don't mind when so-and-so comes over and, I understand blah, 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 but he needs to use a little bit more slyness, if he's going to be checking your sister out. It's really bugging me. And I feel like just grabbing it and be like, it's where shit comes out.
Right. No,
so men have no problem disassociating the function, as I think in the 90s, women did not either. Women were really into men's asses in the 90s.
Right.
No, 80s. 80s.
Yeah, sure. I mean, culturally, I don't know if men's butts are having the moment in straight society that women's are, but I don't think we should say women.
They're trying to. It's one of those things.
I don't think we should. I don't think that. Oh my God. I don't think that Zach just told me in the chat who he was talking about, and that's what I'm reacting to. I'm not comfortable saying that women are not into butts.
I am
generally. But I disagree with that. I think first of all, you're counting out the entire queer community.
No, I'm not.
Which I'm not. Which I don't know. I genuinely do not know if in female relationships if butts are a big thing or not. But I'm just saying,
I just cite my source?
I don't think we know enough about women and their sexuality to say they're not into butts.
I want to cite my source, which listeners, if there's any doubt, I am using a comedic vibe. But. A personal favorite podcast of mine, at least it used to be. I haven't kept up with it lately, but I'm sure it's still great. Of How Did This Get Made? Co-host June Diane Raphael, I'll just go ahead and say very modern progressive type inner politics. I would say definitely not one to speak on behalf of large group of folks. Just has a lot of great causes that people would typically associate with left of center type things, right? In one episode that was quite recent, she said, I don't understand the fixation with men's asses in these films that we watch. And Jason Mantzoukas, one of the other co-hosts, goes, oh, June, are you attempting to speak for all women and say that women don't like men's asses? And she says, yes, I am. She said that women don't like men's asses. So I am borrowing from, but no, I'm not. I mean, this is all good fun, of course. I'm not discounting not fixation, whatever people like to fixate on of any gender that there is their preference. I just think it's a funny trope of the 1980s and early 1990s to think that a man's ass is anywhere in circulation of conversation or admired as much as a woman's ass.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. Yes. So I agree with you. So it's certainly a well-made point that there's already a lot of compartmentalization around butts in culture.
Thank you for researching.
And whether I do agree with you that per capita I'm sure I'm not using that right, that generally men are more fixated on, gay men and straight men are more fixated on butts than gay women or straight women. I agree with that. And I also agree with you. It is funny. And I say this as a butt guy. It is funny that we are just like culturally so fixated on the ass, and it's just like it's kind of weird,
dual
bro.
functioning, folks.
yeah. So,
if
okay.
not more than dual.
So it's probably like relevant to bring to the table that it's like, these butts are a private part, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes,
and they also are also function as like a sex organ. Like there's all this stuff going on. I just still feel that people cannot step out of their literal minds when it comes to, I think that because we compartmentalize the fact that we have bodily functions that we have shame and embarrassment around involving the butt, and still are like, nice butt, look at that butt, butts all over everything, right? That we would
nice
be
tush,
able,
you say with your bros.
Yeah. Oh man, I love hanging out with my bros and just talking tush.
Me too.
That I think that what you're saying, that the fact that there is this dissonance and compartmentalization around butts already would make it that farts are not a big deal if they didn't smell.
No, it's possible. I mean,
in a world where we're talking about where there's like a bunch of songs on the goddamn radio about eating ass, it's just like, we're really going to be that? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I'm reading a really fascinating book.
Maybe
right
just
now
the station I listen to.
Eating ass radio,
yeah.
Or ear as it's abbreviated.
Yeah, it's a very high Sirius XM tier that you have to pay for.
So I'm reading a book right now called "The God Particle." If the universe is the question, what is the answer? Or is it, if the universe is the answer, what is the question? Anyways, it's a great book. Clearly, it's really resonating with me. Man, it's so good, though. And it does talk a lot about the quantum realm. And it, by the way, folks, it's for lay people such as myself. It is a really challenging book. But I think kind of what you're saying of like this alternate universe and all that is like, that this book talks about. It was written in 1993. Really made its way into like the entertainment zeitgeist. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this idea a good pitch for a script? Like, hey, we live in an alt universe,
Sure.
Like, particle accelerator goes haywire. All of a sudden, people are just walking around.
I can definitely see it as like a rejected pitch in like the Rick and Morty writer's room or something.
It really feels like that.
But but I mean, I don't mean to sell it short. I did just say that it will be my life's work that will be puzzled over to the same extent as the trolley problem. So yeah, sure, I'll write a feature about this.
Awesome, cool.
Okay, like I'm thinking, what's a title? Like I'm something like in the vein of If These Walls Could Talk, like if these butts, if these farts didn't smell.
Yeah, I think.
Oh wait, what about? Something about silent but like noisy but not deadly. Squeaky. Well, anyway, we'll get back to that.
Squeaky but clean.
We're obviously not going to get to. We're not going to resolve this today. But you've brought a great deal to the table. So I won't read every comment, because they all more or less say what you're saying is that it's the association, that you can't get around the association. Now, I still contend that we as a society are not ready to occupy the mind space of somebody who has never thought of a fart as something that is stinky.
No, it's impossible.
No, it's impossible, but that's what is required to accept my premise that they wouldn't be embarrassing. And I just think that I'm maybe alone in my ability to do that at this time. Which, look, I know a lot of people only reach this level of transcendence through, DMT, a drug that I have never done. So I'm proud of myself for being able to get there. But Zach, before we close this out, I want to say the other thing that was brought to the table, and the only thing that I feel like even slightly kind of corroborates my premise, is
Sure.
from Reddit user Tuncunmun38.
Mhm.
And this is what Tuncunmun38
Definitely
says.
somebody you want to be associated to just by their name.
Absolutely. No, I'm really glad that this is on my permanent record and my internet footprint, that like I'm out here just like, please pretend farts aren't stinky with me. I seriously, I am surprised nobody accused me of this being a sexual fetish, because I would start to argue with people and then they'd argue back and I'd go, interesting point, because I was just like, I don't know how hard I want to like publicly fight for this, and yet I continue to do it on my own podcast. So Tuncun Moon or Tuncun Mun 38 says, here's the thing. You're right logically. You're totally perfectly right in a logical sense. But using your logic, I could ask, why is something smelling bad funny? Because you could argue there is no correlation. Bottom line is, pun intended, some things are just funny because we said they are for absolutely no reason. Farts being funny is a Western thing. Farts in places such as India are treated just like a sneeze, as you said. Now, I want to just for the record say, I have not verified this with independent research. So if this is any sort of slur on Indian culture, I apologize. And if we have any listeners who are of Indian descent or are in India, I would be very curious to hear about what the social decorum around farts is.
I do know
in that part of the world, but I did think that it lent a lot of credence to my argument that it's like, we just can't get past the context of farts as they stand now. And in my world where farts don't smell, they would not be a big deal.
Right. And I think
that's me resting my case, and I want to let you have the last word.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think that is a really interesting premise and idea. I just think that perhaps it's more than the smell that makes them in a westernized sense, because I do want to, the limited knowledge I have, I do think it is more emphasized in Western culture. I too cannot verify. I've never traveled to India. I don't know anything about the various cultures, subcultures. You know, there's more than just one culture in India. You know, and as far as the way they're treated, I have heard though that exactly what this person is saying. I've at least heard it, and I would say Tuncunmun articulated themselves with a decent amount of respect, where maybe they are using a slur. It doesn't seem like intentional, just based on the limited tone. I have heard though that our emphasis on humor. But just to bring it all back, though, I don't think that them being absent that one element is. I also don't like it too when people say using your logic and then they extrapolate out a new point, because it's like, that's a new point. Like, who knows how I would feel about it? But that's aside. That's a whole other conversation. That's part 2 of our episode on Tidal. Things Zach doesn't like. No, but I don't have anything else to add.
Well, I really appreciate your contribution. I'm gonna bring the burp factor of it all back, and
please don't cite your source. Feel free to run with that one.
Yeah, I just think it's a very interesting point, and I think that you bring new interesting insights. Nicole has brought new interesting insights whenever I've discussed it with her. I am firm on where I stand on this issue. But what I really want is just to generate thought and discussion and vigorous conversation. Listeners, please sound off, get involved, and do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm a visionary? Much like the argument fundamentalist Christians will use when you question the authenticity of the New Testament. It's often presented to you as a binary choice that Jesus was either a madman, a liar, or who he said he was. And I am kind of posing the same question. It's also, we could talk about how I don't think that is actually correct framing at all, and that there's a lot of other ways and nuances to answer the question of who.
Can I
who
have
was
two?
the-
I'm going to go with Madman and Liar.
Yeah, I also think there's a fourth option of, or he didn't say that shit. That's the option I pose, is just like, or these guys that wrote down what he said like 80 years after he was alive might have embellished or made up some of their own stuff.
Or in the
But
case
listen,
of John, when he wrote Revelation, dropped acid and then written a book.
yeah, there you go. But I now
Anyways.
pose a similar choice to our listeners of whether I am a madman, a visionary, or believe these things that I am saying. And I'd like to hear.
I
you,
love it. Well,
because it has been called into question if I still believe this premise at this point. Because, like I said, I've been going pretty hard on this, and no one is validating me. But I'm pretty dug in now. I kind of feel like I have.
No, but
to
I think though
commit.
that you seem really open though to like you complimented my new. I didn't mean it as a curveball or anything like that, but just as like an additional idea. So I don't think that you're like as dug in on like being right as you even seem to say you are. You seem open to new angles.
That's true. I just don't. I'm committed. I'm dug into that. There's something here. I have something here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree with that at least that much.
Should we get into the album?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. This is surely the lead-in that Fiona Apple would want to us discussing her debut album.
well, originally the album was going to open with the track "Do Farts Stink" or something like that, but she decided to cut it.
Do you think of Fiona Apple? Okay, everything about her career is the same, but before Tidal opens with "Sleep to Dream," she has a song about this, and it's
Like
not
an Adam Sandler song.
Yes, like an Adam Sandler song, but like weirder and like not overtly comedic. Like it's an earnest exploration of like the world where farts don't stink. And it's not like disguised with like poetry, like where like, you know, years later people are like, is this song about farts? Like it's written beautifully in her beautiful style of prose, but it is explicitly about if farts didn't stink, would we still be embarrassed by them? Mm-hmm. It opens the album before Sleep to Dream. Everything else on the album is the same. Does Fiona Apple still have a career in music?
I think she has a career, but a slightly less successful one.
Do you think
people
it's
are
one
already
where
puzzled by her? So
right.
they might be a little bit more puzzled.
Sure, that is true. Do you think that it's kind of like, you know, the way we discuss like artists like who have done horrific things but have made really important or much lauded work? Like, is it like this thing where it's like,
No.
oh, she's brilliant, but we have to always talk about the song where she wondered if farts don't stink, would we still be embarrassed by them?
I don't know. Well, I mean, maybe it would be like that, but I think it's more like artists that have taken themselves incredibly seriously and then not seriously enough for my own taste. Like Beck. Beck would be in that camp.
I would put Bob Dylan in that camp.
I would put Bob Dylan
too.
in that camp too.
Yeah.
I would put Harry Nilsson in that camp.
Great example. Great example.
I would put Paul McCartney, although Paul McCartney has never gone into bodily functions and even like some of his silly. So no, I just think that Fiona Apple, you know, and I think this is maybe a more organic segue. I think Fiona Apple like has really stuck to her guns in terms of tone, which is a weird thing to say, but you know, we're only talking about one album, but even within this one album, I do, and this is what a lot of the critical reviews talk about, both contemporary and retrospective, that I really, really appreciate that layer of insight, is that I think that it could, and maybe it is to some people, I think that an album, you know, written and created by such a young person, because as much as, you know, we've set that to the side and so forth, and I think it's important to continue to do so, it's very difficult to get around the fact that 16, 17, and 18-year-olds can have brilliantly profound things to say across any era of time. I think that's one of the reasons why we love the Diary of Anne Frank so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this is a young girl in a tormented time being a kid and also discussing these very, very heavy things with a, so I mean, that I don't mean to compare. I'm just saying that like age at a certain point becomes obfuscated by the level of profoundness that the author or person is. Generally speaking, though, it's really hard to get around the fact that somebody has a lower maturity level at certain. That's why I think the best performances in acting come from people ages 29 to 33, and that it's a standout when it's, you know what I'm saying? So I think the same exists across a lot of artistic avenues, but this album doesn't really waver in its mature tone, is what I think is so cool and consistent about it. Please go ahead.
No, I love what you're saying, and I'm glad you brought it up because it is interesting because I get a little bit of like an icky feeling when I feel an impulse to discuss it from the point of view of I can't believe a teenager wrote these fucking songs.
Right.
And I think the reason I feel like that is because of how she was condescended to in the public discourse and the media, where it's like it almost feels like that, like kind of this thing that is like notable for like how talented and sure and in control of that talent she was at such a young age was kind of used a little bit as a weird knock against her, which is strange. Having said all that, I can't believe a fucking teenager wrote these songs. And and it's because the thing you're talking about of like, okay, well, why are we drawn to performers who are in this age of 29 to 35 or whatever? Well, it's because people generally have not accrued a life of interesting enough and experiences that it's not that people who are young aren't smart and sensitive and
absolutely
articulate and full of ideas. Like that's generally always where like the next batch of new ideas comes from is from the youth, right? But
totally, I
tend to be interested in what people have to say when they are a little more experienced in life. Part of that might be my age too. I probably was more interested in hearing from teenagers when I was one, but listening to this album, and
this is a profound statement, though. I think
it is notable and, as far as I'm concerned, unusual for somebody of such a young age to be able to articulate the things that are articulated on this record and outside of the songs.
Yes,
because some people, part of what's so fun about Bob Dylan, for example, as a character is not that he's like a dumb guy or something. Like I think he's a very smart guy, but what he is able to articulate in song versus in an interview, there is a wild dichotomy between those two things. It's part of what's a crack up about him is that he gets all mealy mouthed and weird and kind of inarticulate, and you're like, where you're just kind of like, hey, like, are you high?
Can you bring back the songwriter?
Yeah, like, and watching and reading a lot of interviews with Fiona from around the time that this album came out, I don't see a big difference in her ability to articulate herself at that time versus now when she speaks on things now. If there's a difference, it's just that it's somebody who has been through the ringer of public scrutiny for a long time in their life now, and maybe has an ability to not display the same extent of vulnerability that she was at this time, which I think people really took as an opportunity to like slam her for being honest about things that were important to her. But I will say this and then shut up. I walked away from my listening of this album in preparation for this podcast with the and I'm not being falsely modest here, I'm like 18-year-old Fiona Apple knows more about life than 36-year-old Walker Glenn.
I agree.
The sense I took away.
Well, I don't agree that she knows more about life, but I agree too, man. It's just, it does make me, I've gotten a lot better about not reveling in what I think people alike do, people at least that are afforded the luxury to do so, of thinking like, oh, if I had the knowledge, and not in an Uncle Rico type way of like this false ambition of what you would become, but like, because time is our most limited resource, right? As people that have our natural basic needs covered, time is our most limited resource. I apologize. Most limited resource that we often fantasize about going back and utilizing, with different levels of knowledge. But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's like sometimes I just think about when I've listened to this album in particular, and when the Pond to an extent as well. It's just not the album we're talking about today. And she did have a little bit more time on her back. That's not to say that the profound nature of her writing and a lot of interviews that she gave in the press are not, equitable or equal to rather, whatever. That's just not what we're talking about today. But man, I'd like to, if I could, just actually quote a couple of the articles, two of which I quoted last week, but I think that they're equally relevant to what we're talking about right now about her strength as a songwriter poet. So just to kind of lead into this is a little bit of a backtrack, but this is from the Digital Cult. The writer is Mike Ventimiglia. From June 1997. So just to kind of backtrack, he gave the album a very high rating. He said, I played piano. He's quoting Fiona Apple here. She says, I played piano since I was about 8 and always wrote songs. I sang them because it wouldn't make sense for anyone else to. And sing them she does. Fiona says she has been influenced by such artists as blues great Billie Holiday and famous poet Maya Angelou. The 10 songs in this album are the exact product of these influences, are without a doubt a masterpiece. I love that. Nice and succinct. And then to go to this MTV article written by Beth Weingartner, I quoted this a little bit last week. First taste of Fiona Apple is sweet. Walker, this speaks a little bit to the age thing that we were just talking about. Beth says, what makes Apple and songs which appear on her debut album Tidal special is how unique they are. It's not that she's a good songwriter for a teenager. It's that she's just a great songwriter, period. Love that quote so much. Nice and succinct. To go on a little bit, she says, one of the most remarkable things about Apple is her intense self-possession. As a lyricist, she focuses on relationships, most of which are in trouble, but she's not weeping about it. So just to pause there, I think that really what resonated about that with me is the thing you're speaking to, that like 18-year-old Fiona Apple, to paraphrase, you said, might, even if you're being funny or not, feels like she has maybe more to say and a little bit of a richer and deeper understanding about life and relationships than we might feel at this age time in our life, comedic or not. I would say I agree with that. She goes on to say, although Apple considers herself a writer first and then a pianist, her piano work is understated throughout Tidal, blended percussion, vibraphone, guitar, chamberlain, and bass, while her vocals loom above. Though her voice is untrained, there's an unpolished warmth to it. Often it's as if she's speaking melodically as a poet would, especially in places on Soul and Girl, Carry On. Though her natural range is at the low end of alto, Apple occasionally trespasses into upper registers with no ill effects. Now, I read that, even though that might seem a little bit disconnected, just because I think that this is just a little bit of a refresher from what we talked about last week, that her voice is, to say untrained is laughable to me. She's just such a beautiful and incredible singing voice and such a range as an artist. But I just love that Beth also talked a little bit about some of her strengths as not only a lyricist, but as a musician and as a singer. And Walker, I want to kick it back to you because I don't know how much more you want to add on her maturity for the age she was and the things we were just talking about, or if we want to get into album data. So please go ahead.
No, none. And I think I think that it's very clear without us explicitly stating how we feel about the album. All of this stuff is conveying why this is such an impressive debut.
So impressive.
And I think with that, we can maybe get into the kind of bones of when it came out, who was involved, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the debut album from Fiona Apple, what's her full name again, Walker? Fiona Apple
McAfee-Maggart?
McAfee-Maggart. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the debut album from Fiona Apple. We'll just go ahead and truncate it, like we will some of our longer titles. That's Tidal. I'm not trying to be I'm not even trying to be funny. I think just the choosing of the spelling is really cool. It was released on July 23rd, 1996. The label is now. I found a couple interesting things on the label that released it. Maybe you might be able to help me out. They're labeled as the Work Group, but they do seem like a sub. The labels are listed as the Work Group, Columbia, and Clean Slate. Now, do you have any insight into that, or does that just mean that it was maybe a smaller indie label that did the initial recordings,
and then the distribution was through Columbia?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know.
I didn't research this particular facet of it, but
okay. That's
fine. That's what I would expect.
Okay. And I just gestured at this. It was recorded at Ocean Way Recording Studios in Los Angeles, California. Now, Walker, I know we're trying to stay away from last season and all that, but does any particular album that we recovered in the Radiohead season ring a bell as far as being recorded?
Well, there's only one recorded in Los Angeles, so I'm guessing you're talking about "Hail to the Thief." I did not make that connection.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if she can overcome the Ocean Way curse.
Yeah. What if this album started off with, "That's a nice way to start, Johnny," but talking to John Bryan?
Yeah, and it's like, why are you doing a British accent?
Anyway, okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. It was recorded in 1995 up through 1996, so, mid-year release, but obviously finishing touches and so forth. I wasn't able to find too much research on if that was Fiona putting any finishing touches or just kind of final mixing and editing. The producer of this album, Andrew Slater, now very interesting fellow, very interesting relation to Fiona Apple that I'm not sure if you have any insight on that. We'll come to that in a second, but he's just somebody that was instrumental in getting her career off the ground, right? Not giving him the credit for that, but just, a very important piece of it.
Well, I think that we could say, and this is a loaded term, but, I would say that in the sense that we understand this word, he discovered Fiona Apple.
Yeah.
A quote from the aforementioned Nicole Love that I really enjoy is I once sent her an article that the headline was like, "Meet the man who discovered Prince." And she said, discovering Prince is kind of like discovering America. But he was longtime manager. And I would say also I was curious about Andrew Slater, and looking at my records, I noticed he is still listed as management up through the Idler Wheel. On her most recent album, Fetch the Bolt Cutters, he is not listed as management, but he is in the thank yous. So I think that in a very predatory industry where people are often taken advantage of by people in that position, it seems like they maintained a long working relationship. And so if he's good with Fiona, he's good with me. And it seems like Andy Slater is a good egg.
I agree, man. That was really all the insight and research that I had done as well. But and I had seen that as well. And but I did not know that he was thanked in the liner notes though. So that makes me happy. Yeah, Fiona Apple, not one to mince words against necessarily people that have wronged her. She feels wronged by. So yeah, it's just like you said. It's like it's always nice, and maintaining a partnership with somebody doesn't necessarily indicate that there were no heated moments or anything like that. But it's like you said, it's a very dirty industry. Well, you didn't say that, but that's the sense I got. And it's really cool to see that a longstanding, fruitful collaboration and partnership has been maintained. So he was the producer of the album. This album produced 6 singles. Yeah. They were released as follows. Shadowboxer was the lead single. Slow Like Honey was the follow-up. Sleep to Dream, a personal favorite of mine, not the personal favorite, but Sleep to Dream was the third single. The First Taste was the fourth single. Criminal, a song that I would say, along with Sleep to Dream and Shadowboxer, might be one of the more prominent singles. But that was the 5th single of the album. And then Never Is a Promise was the final. And I really, really like that release order. I don't really care about it beyond Shadowboxer and Never Is a Promise as the opening and closer. But I think those represent some a very nice summation of what you're going to get in this album. Now, obviously, the album, it's hard to kind of survey this unless you're, a radio station at the time to get this data as far as, what I'm sure Spotify has these kind of analytics and so forth. But, it seems to me Shadowboxer, Sleep to Dream, and Criminal represent the most commercial vibe in terms of the singles. We'll talk about this more as we listen to the tracks. Of course, if you have anything you want to interject there, please go ahead. But I just love the
I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think we'll get into that as we get into the songs a little more. I was very surprised to find out that Sleep to Dream was her top charting single because I remember Shadowboxer and Criminal on the radio a lot, but I think Sleep to Dream is, for me, it was an album track that I got into when I got into the album. But I think it's actually one of her most prominent singles.
Yeah, no, yeah. I was just saying those three, and it's. I love that. It sounds like you don't agree necessarily. I think those are maybe on the more commercial kind of upbeat side. But I love though that these other three, these sort of. I'm not saying that they're all ballady or anything like that. I just love what a taste that the public was given based on what a success this album was. That's all I'm saying. I love it.
Yeah, and it's only a 10-track album, so 6 of them being singles. It's. I mean, what a different industry it was back then. But
yeah.
Producing 6 singles from a 10-track record is notable accomplishment in any era.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And as of July 2016, I don't know why the data has not been updated in the last 7 years, but this album has sold 3 million copies in the United States. So I don't know where we're at today. I don't know if it's 3.5 million. I don't know if it's 7, but I would venture to guess that it's probably still somewhere between 3 and 4. Just because the way we stream music, the way we consume music is always changing. Fiona Apple remains a critical and commercial, huge selling artist. Again, these figures were just in the United States, but that was the most recent I could find. That's what's published on Wikipedia. That's what's published on Billboard.com. So I was not able to find if it has since to what extent it has surpassed. The next thing I wanted to cover was a lot of the different musicians that played on this album. But Walker, anything you would like to add to what I discovered?
Well, let's talk about like the background that led to this album being recorded a little bit. So we already mentioned him. Andrew Slater is instrumental in breaking Fiona Apple into the music industry. But before that, she was, as a teenager, living between New York City with her mother and Los Angeles with her father. And in 1994, on one of the times that she was staying with her father, who we talked about a lot in the last episode, was that Brandon McAfee? Or was he Maggart?
He was Maggart.
Okay, so Brandon Maggart, actor and musician, he kind of, her family was like aware of her talent for composing original songs, and he really like nurtured and encouraged this talent. And they recorded a demo tape of 3 songs. Now, I know one of the songs is, I believe, is it Sleep to Dream? I know it's something that ended up on the album and the other 2 aren't, and they're not publicly available. And she has referred to them as not good. But I know, or maybe it was Never Is a Promise.
I'll find it in my notes here if you want to keep going.
Sure.
Because in any case, know what you're referring to.
They record 3 songs, one of which is on the album, 2 of which are lost to the ephemera of time. But they record, this is trivia that I came across just watching interviews with Fiona Apple that I really loved. They made 78 copies of the tape, which I just love the specificity of that number. And I also saw her talking about how her dad was really coaching her about how, you're going to have to be out there pounding the pavement, giving these tapes to every, like kind of like try to teach her to like sell it. And she's very like not into that and just kind of like, I'll do the music, but I'm not going to like really put myself out there to promote myself necessarily. But what she did do in Manhattan, back in New York, she gives a copy of the demo to a friend who happens to work as a babysitter for a music publicist named Catherine Schenker. And that music publicist passed it along to the producer and manager, Andrew Slater, who instantly recognizes the monumental talent on this tape. And that's where the Fiona Apple story as we know it as fans really begins. Another bit of trivia I loved about this is that they made 78 copies, but I saw an interview with her where she said, I still have 77 of the tapes in a box under my bed because the first one that she gave away resulted in her signing with Andrew Slater as her manager. The other thing, Zach, that you read, which is just so great. And who knows if that interview was from probably like, 98 or so. I would love to think that she still has those somewhere. Who knows? The other thing, you referenced this earlier, that the intention was really to get her to sell the songs more than it was to break Fiona Apple as an artist. And even though her family and she were aware of her talent for composing original music and songs. It honestly, to me, sounds like in such a talented family of artists and singers and dancers and musicians that kind of how you were talking about, like not to the same extent, but that music is something that we grew around as like a kind of normal hobby or talent, to see people that I honestly get the impression that her talent was downplayed in her own mind, maybe because she grew up in such a pool of talented people and artistic people, because she like genuinely did not seem to be aware of the fact that she has a very rich and beautiful and amazing singing voice. And it was Andrew Slater that gave her that feedback. Now, I don't know if she had gotten that feedback from other people and discounted it because they didn't have the credibility of working in the music industry, or if just maybe she had genuinely not gotten that feedback from people in her family or whatever. But I don't think it was false modesty when I heard her say in an interview from a few years ago that he told her like, oh, well, you have a really beautiful singing voice. And that was kind of the first time it had occurred to her that she could be the person behind these songs and do her own songs. And that's, and then they went and cut the album Tidal. So I think unless you have anything to add to that, I think we can kind of get into the musicians who played on this album with her.
Yeah, so on the on the additional studio musicians, rather personnel, if you will, credited to this album, it's a really, really big cast of characters, and I don't know if we want to read each one off, but I did have just a couple of folks I wanted to highlight. And this is not in sequential order of like their contribution to the album, but Amber Maggart, her sister, is credited with harmony vocals on track 9. That would be Pale September, if you're counting listeners, which I thought was really, really cool. But as far as musicians that are maybe folks that we might know because of their own longstanding longevity, so John Bryan is credited with guitar on tracks 1 and 2, track 6 and 10, right? So listeners, if you're counting, that's Sleep to Dream, Soul and Girl, The First Taste, and Carry On, right? So all fantastic songs. He is also credited with, I'm not going to name the tracks on each one, but guitar is my primary instrument. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, sure.
I do want to call it out, though, on the vibraphone that he's credited with playing that instrument on tracks 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and 9 and 10. Right. So that is really cool. Are you familiar with the vibraphone at all, Walker?
I adore the vibraphone.
Awesome.
It's one of the most gorgeous sounding instruments on the planet. And I feel like it's not an instrument you hear a ton because I think mallet instruments are probably pretty difficult to be fluent at.
Yeah, I feel like the vibraphone is. I have a really big effect. Well, Walker, can you tell people in layman terms, because I think you're actually really good at that, of what the vibraphone is or looks like, or what listeners might associate it to?
Well, I believe it's a metal mallet instrument, correct?
Yeah, it's a percussion instrument. Yeah, it's a steel.
Yeah, so it has steel. Are those considered keys? I mean, you threw to me. I love the way it sounds. It is very natural. Like it has a natural tremolo, which is the volume waving in and out. Right. So if you hit a note, it's like ding.
Exactly. Yeah. So the vibraphone it resembles the steel marimba, right? Which it superseded actually. So it's older. One of the main differences, though, between the vibraphone and other keyboard percussion instruments is that each bar suspends over a resonator tube containing a flat metal disc. So that's what gives it, I think, a really...
that's where that tremolo comes from.
Exactly. One of the many things I would say that gives it a very... and there's, of course, always going to be modifications, right? Some have a sustain pedal. I think most actually do. All I'm just saying is that for these really kind of geniusly crafted... maybe I don't want to say simpler instruments, but instruments that date back to a more recent time, but they're more rudimentary in their construction. And all I mean by that is the vibraphone, I want to say, was created in the early 1900s, I think 1916. There's a really great podcast that I've loved since 2009 with Josh Clark and Chuck Bryant, Stuff You Should Know. It's going to be at the top of your charts on all your podcast app. They have a wonderful, wonderful episode on the vibraphone and on the theremin. which is so I went back and re-listened to those. But yeah, it's it was developed in the early 20th century. There have been modifications made. That was a very, very long-winded way of saying that but at its brass tacks, that's what it is, and it's a really, really ingeniously created instrument, and I think really, really difficult to know where to use. But for a guy like John Bryan, who also plays piano, attack pianos, dulcitone, marimba, and chamberlin on the album, John Bryan has a really, really great career collaborating with amazing directors, right? And I think that is exactly what you're hearing on this album is a wonderful collaboration from a top-notch musician. So John Bryan, it's in this article right here from Scene Magazine. It says Apple is aptly backed by a top-notch cast throughout, led by the talents of Jellyfish/Grey's alum John Bryan, who weighs in on a variety of instruments, including harp, octagon, vibraphone, chamberlin, marimba, tack piano, and guitar, accentuating Apple's poignant musings with melodic percussion and subtle texture. Now, please take it away, Walker, as far as John Bryan's additional credits.
Well, I did want to just say that I think that the vibraphone gives a it's even though it's not on every song, it's all over this album, and it really contributes to like the kind of jazzy atmosphere that they create with a lot of these songs. Also, the term trip hop was mentioned because there's a lot of like live drumming, but there's also a lot of like drum looping too. And the chamberlin was not an instrument I was aware of. I assumed he was playing a mellotron, and then I looked up which is a early analog synthesizer that would be probably most famously recognized from the intro to Strawberry Fields Forever. And this is basically a analogous instrument, very similar type of synthesizer.
It was developed a little bit more recently, I think in the 1950s for the chamberlin. So a little newer.
Yes. So John Bryan is one of many musicians on this album, but he is the one who is playing the largest variety of instruments.
Yeah.
And I assumed before this re-listen that he produced this album because he has a very distinct production style and sound to his own music that is very reminiscent on this album. But this is a little bit of a Nigel type of relationship where Nigel is the engineer on the Bends and then produces every Radiohead album thereafter. Now, John Bryan has not produced every Fiona album afterwards, but he does produce the next two. And this begins a very fruitful collaboration between the two musicians. Now, as far as his sort of CV, I don't know Jellyfish or the other band you mentioned.
Grey's.
Okay, gotcha. But John Bryan is you might not know who he is and already be a fan. He's done some of the best motion picture soundtrack or motion picture scores of all time, in my opinion. The score to Paul Thomas Anderson's Punch Drunk Love, the score to Paul Thomas Anderson Magnolia. On that, he has a cover of the Harry Nilsson song One with Amy Mann that is sensational. The score to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I Heart Huckabees, as well as being a solo artist in his own right. He has an album of solo music that's really great songs. His work as a producer is just totally unparalleled. Not only his production of some of Fiona Apple's albums, but he also produced Late Registration, the Kanye West record that is, in my opinion, possibly the high watermark of his music. He just really has a lush, gorgeous sound that I would say he's really, really good at seamlessly mixing live instrumentation and looping and sampling in a way that is just not forced sounding at all. And as a musician, I've had the experience of getting to see him live a couple times, and live he does
no kidding, Walker. Really?
Oh yeah. And it's possibly
wow. I didn't know that.
Oh yes, and it's one of the most unique concert experiences I've ever had. So I actually saw him on back-to-back days because mostly what he does is play at Largo as kind of a house band type of thing. Largo is a a venue in Los Angeles where Fiona Apple herself has played a lot over the years. And it's very associated with like a specific crew of musicians. Elliott Smith was a part of that scene when he went to LA and lived there during the recording and release of his last 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a great video, Zach, if you've never seen, of John Bryan and Elliott Smith playing a show together at Largo, where Elliott's playing guitar and John Bryan is just switching to different instruments.
Oh, is he on the drums a lot?
He might be. Like, he plays guitar with them on a few songs. He plays piano. He's all over the thing. But it's like these John Bryan arrangements, and it's them playing this show at Largo, and the video is shot by none other than Paul Thomas Anderson. So the Largo is like a hub of awesome hipster comedy, film, and music world in Los Angeles. But John Bryan, so normally, he's not like, he doesn't really go out and tour as far as I can tell, but he opened for Of Montreal when I saw them at the Fox Theater. And the night before that, he played a show in a much smaller venue than the Fox Theater in San Francisco, Café du Nord. And I was at both shows. And what he does is he does these completely improvised shows where he takes requests from the audience of covers, figures them out by ear on stage, and plays fully orchestrated, fleshed out versions of them off the top of his head with loops. And so
awesome.
Yeah, so he'll go over and play a riff on the guitar and then set the guitar down and be keeping time out loud as he walks over to the drum set. So he's played like he did Helter Skelter, and he goes and plays it on the guitar, then walks over to the drum set going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and then loops crazy drum parts. And then by the end, you're hearing a full band version of Helter Skelter with this one guy. He also did a thing where he sat down at the piano and did a live score to a Felix the Cat cartoon. Like, he just does all sorts of cool, interesting stuff. And he's I would say, like, just as far as his ability to play a generational talent and some sort of savant, I honestly don't know what his training is in a classical sense, but he's just a dude who can pick up anything and pretty much play it.
I love all that.
So that's the John. But I would urge people to check out his soundtrack work in particular. Obviously, most of you have heard Late Registration. Also, Mac Miller's posthumously released album Circles is basically the way some later Fiona Apple stuff is basically like a 2-person collaboration between Mac Miller and John Bryan, kind of playing these orchestrations that are in the artist's head, but being able to execute them on a variety of instruments. It's a really, really gorgeous, sweet album. Anyway.
No. Yeah, that's about all I had on John Bryan. There's one other person I wanted to highlight. Well, I guess I should back up too and say John Bryan. It's interesting because as you're retelling me how he would play these songs, some pretty strong memories of you describing this show to me are coming back. But maybe it was before I had an awareness of who John Bryan was. I've always loved the soundtrack to Magnolia in particular. Punch Drunk Love is a movie, as we talked about last season very briefly in our episode discussing The Eraser. We talked about kind of my affection for that film as I've gotten a little bit older. But it's just funny to hear you retell these stories now, having much more of an awareness of John Bryan's musical ability and who he is, and knowing that, because I don't know how long ago this was, but that's so cool. As skilled as he does sound, it just seems to me that maybe there was somebody who I'm not saying is more of a genius, but may have been a little bit better suited to score There Will Be Blood and The Master. But hey, no reason to get down that track.
Definitely different tone. Like, I mean, John Bryan's music, I've wondered that too, if John Bryan is a little bit like, hey, what the fuck? But the thing is, though, is that John Bryan doesn't just score these kind of prestige movies. He actually, he's scored a bunch of kind of like Seth Rogen, Judd Apatow adjacent comedies too. And the scores are always amazing, but he does these
Step Brothers.
That's what I was thinking. Thank you. Yeah. He's done a bunch of movies kind of in that category as well. So I think that him and Johnny Greenwood, I would say, are equal and kind of similar types of talents in terms of like their musical vocabulary. Zach is making a warning expression. I just mean I would say that they both are they share a similar, very unique talent for just being so fluent in a variety of instruments and styles. But I think that John Bryan, he has his music has a much more kind of like playful sound to it, and so I can see why it's very suited to Punch Drunk Love, and why something darker and scarier from Johnny Greenwood is more suited for There Will Be Blood. But I have wondered, because I was kind of like, oh, is he going to bring back John Bryan for like Licorice Pizza, something that's a little more,
it seemed more suited.
Still Johnny Greenwood. So, hey, sometimes we move. Who knows what happened there? Maybe they're totally great buds and they just don't work together anymore. Or maybe they didn't get along. I have no idea.
Before we get into the percussion side of Tidal, I do just want to be a little bit salesy. And listeners, if you don't have an interest in hearing us gab about Radiohead, that's perfectly fine. We did have the pleasure of having Casey Pegram. He's a podcast producer for iHeartRadio and has a whole bunch of other credentials, but not the least of which is he's a filmmaker, and we got to discuss some of the films of Paul Thomas Anderson and Johnny Greenwood's collaboration in that episode. It's called Radiohead at the Movies with Casey Pegram. Just a really, really great moment for me personally to interview somebody with such a depth of knowledge. But that's back in our first season. That's not what we're talking about right now. So I wanted to highlight Matt Chamberlain.
And we might discuss... I just was going to say, and we can cut this if we want, but we're not going to discuss Fiona Apple from a perspective of it being in relation to men that she's been romantically linked to, but very high profile relationship with Paul Thomas Anderson, and Fiona Apple is a part of the atmosphere very much so of at least one of his movies. So little hint for something that might be discussed this season as well. We might get to talk about.
No, absolutely.
Talk about some of that film that we both love and have discussed in the past, but this time from a Fiona point of view.
Yes, and I will say Paul Thomas Anderson's current partner, and I believe wife, but I know the mother of his two children, Maya Rudolph.
4 children.
Mother of his 4 children, excuse me.
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph was born July 27th, but we won't talk about who else shares that birthday today. But that person just happens to be a few steps removed from Johnny Greenwood is the connection I've been able to make. Walker, you can cut that. So Matt Chamberlain plays drums on a huge portion of this album, right? He plays drums on tracks 1 and 2. Sorry, that's Sleep to Dream and Stolen Girl, track 4, which is Criminal, track 6, The First Taste, and then tracks 8, 9, and 10, which is The Child Is Gone, Pale September, and Carry On. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're familiar with this album, those are songs that, any song is going to require percussion. It's not just somebody raging at a drum set, but I would say those are some of the more percussion groove. No, I wouldn't say that. They're just songs that you're like, oh yeah, I can remember even if I don't have a deep, long-standing knowledge of various types of percussion. Those are the songs that come to mind. I do want to highlight this gentleman's resume because it is huge and very, very successful. And I'm becoming really, really, really interested in studio musicians. And I would say that has to do with the fact when I read a book a couple years ago about Jimmy Page, guitar player for Led Zeppelin, started out as a studio guy. Our own Tom Skinner from The Smile started out as a studio musician. That's not to say that studio musicians don't want to have their own group and their own career and all that. Josh Klinghoffer, studio musician. He's currently the guitar player for the band Pearl Jam. But yeah, Walker, I've become really fascinated with studio musicians, these men and women, these folks that get to participate in such brilliant pieces of art. And I have romanticized it to the extent that it's like you get to hang out with all the people, but you might not have that level of invasion that front and center people do. Who knows? But I just think it's a really, really cool place to be. So Matthew Chamberlain, who plays percussion on a huge portion of these songs, and that is limited to drums and general percussion. So, he's not getting that Ed O'Brien shaker credit. I'll tell you that much.
No. Wouldn't it be amazing if Ed O'Brien was featured on the shaker on this album?
We know he was pretty busy in 1995 and 1996, so my man isn't great at multitasking.
Yeah.
So he probably turned down an offer, honestly.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, like it's like the label is paying to fly Ed in from England, even though they've got a perfectly good drummer and percussionist right there. It's like, but no one does it like Ed.
Not only is he perfectly good, but he's a drummer, producer, and he's a songwriter of his own. He's played with, let me lay this on you, Walker, some of the groups and solo artists he has provided percussion on their albums. Pearl Jam, David Bowie, The Wallflowers, Tori Amos, Lisa Marie Presley, Elton John, Brandi Carlile, Garbage, and Macy Gray. Not only is that just an amazing group of artists, but a huge genre variance too, right? Which I just think is incredible. He has a really interesting biography. We're not going to go into it, but he's a California guy. He started learning to play the drums at the young age of 15. He's just obviously had a prolific career. He was the actual second drummer for the band Pearl Jam for a very, very short time early on in his career. I'm not going to keep going on and on, but just incredible collaborations, an incredibly skilled musician. No bad skeletons in the personal life section from what I could find, which is always appreciated. Now, I do just want to highlight it just to kind of round out, what we picture as a traditional band. We have Sarah Lee on the bass guitar, but she only plays bass guitar on a couple of the songs. We already talked about Amber Maggart. Van Dyke Parks is on string arrangement. That is only on one song, but this individual is just somebody that has done a lot of great work in film collaborations. In Afro-Caribbean music, Caribbean music, depending on how you want to pronounce it, but a lot of incredible filmic work, and then a lot of great collaborations on the rock and roll side too. Ringo Starr, U2, Grizzly Bear, Bob Dylan, Silverchair. Oh, and also on Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys album Smile. Yeah. So that's Van Dyke Parks, and so it's just I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. This is not to check the box for folks that are abundantly familiar with Fiona backstory and trivia and so forth. But it's incredible to me that because a lot of these folks' resume was filled out after Tidal in a way, not Van Dyke Parks, but also was completely, and I don't know how that works. I don't know if the studio brings them in or if it's the studio musician is at a place where they can choose. It doesn't matter to me. It's just so incredible to see Fiona at the tippy top. She wrote these songs. She created them. Of course, we're not diminishing that. But to see the men and women that collaborated on this is so fucking exciting and awesome. And a little wonder as to why it's such an amazing album, in addition to the lyrics and the vocals and the piano and all that. Do you see what I'm getting at?
I do. Yeah. No, it's really great. I mean, it's look, I'm pretty sure that if these songs existed on like a lo-fi album of her sitting at the piano, I'm sure that we would probably still love it. And I bet a lot of Fiona Apple's fans still would. But they created something that, could be marketed and sold in the mainstream. There was a great push behind this record. And I'm glad that I'm glad that there was, because we got the career that we did. I would also say too that you were saying who knows how these things come together. This is a little bit of a speculation on my part, but this also might be where Andrew Slater was earning his keep, so to speak, as somebody who knows the music industry. Because if Matt Chamberlain played in the Wallflowers, I know that one of the groups that Andrew Slater managed was the Wallflowers. So I'm sure this guy had a huge.
Who the Wallflowers are too?
Yes, they're the band of the best songwriter in the Dylan family, Jacob Dylan. Poor Jacob Dylan. He might.
I know. I don't really, even mind the Wallflowers.
No, I actually really only know the song One Headlight, and I think it's a good song.
It's a great song.
But, it's tough to have the last name Dylan or McCartney or Lennon and then be like, I'm going to do this too now. But in any case, so the Wallflowers is Jacob Dylan's band. So this guy Andrew Slater was working
earning
with
his
a lot
keep,
of notable artists, and I'm sure that he was able to pull from that Rolodex. And like I said, at least I don't know if we're going to see. Well, I know we see her sister Amber Maggart on future Fiona Apple Records. And we've already said that John Bryan, this is the beginning of a big collaboration. I'm curious to see if we see some of these other musicians, but in any case, they all came together to make a great record on this one.
They did, and not to belabor the point, but it's like you said, like, you know, maybe a lo-fi album and so forth, you know, we would enjoy it. Well, of course we would, and that's what, you know, brought Andrew Slater on and brought everybody to make this album what it is, right? So we know the songs were great, right? Now, without just kind of belaboring the additional musicianship and all that, I've covered everything that I want to, and I think that as these folks continue to occur or reoccur, come back, and so forth, we'll call attention to that as the albums go on. But Walker, really, that was all that I had. I have a lot on the songs, their lyrics, and my thoughts on them, but I want to hand it over to you if you have anything else you'd like to add.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think we'll talk about contributions as they're relevant, but I do think and there's a lot of names we didn't mention, but that's, you know, it's just we kind of are highlighting the people who it seems like were a part of collaborating on the bulk of the songs, and then you know, a lot of great musicianship and playing on the album. But you know, go ahead and take a look at the liner notes or the Wikipedia yourself for that, because it's a big list, and it would be probably kind of boring to listen to us just list every musician and what song they played on. No, I'm really excited to talk about the songs themselves. I've already made no secret of the fact that I'm a really big fan of this record. I will say, you know, talking about a fantasy lo-fi version of it, there are some points on this album where the production, to me, diminishes some of the raw power of Fiona Apple's songwriting and vocals and piano playing a little bit. That is very, very common with debuts before people have, as artists, had a chance to, and a lot of artists never get this opportunity to kind of take full control over their own artistic vision. I don't exactly know where that is a function of Fiona Apple just growing into who she would be as an artist as she went on, or where that was the label or coaching or her not having full say in everything. Not really sure about that, and didn't really find anything to make that any clearer in all my research about this. But I am interested to talk about, even though I really love this album, I'm interested to talk about, you know, my little nitpicks, as I love to have, of where I wish things were maybe
wait to hear 'em.
a little different, or where I prefer kind of the direction that that the production and arrangements would take on future albums.
Yeah, I really only have one song in particular where I have a large complaint to lodge, and we'll get to that. I was just thinking, though, about debut albums, though, where the production, it's difficult to know if it was the artist's naivete or newness or whatever, or a studio influence. But I was just thinking, just because it's relevant in that we covered them in season 1, in Radiohead's debut album, Pablo Honey, that one moment on, it's sort of a throwaway track, Creep, rather. That part where I don't know if it's Johnny Greenwood or Tom York or Ed O'Brien, who knows who is doing this, but that dumb check it, but like, that sucks. It's just, I don't even mind saying that's probably the low point of the album for me in terms of production and decisions and all that.
That's one that doesn't like indicate any of the kind of odd and unique impulses that would define Radiohead. It's really like what they would become is much more contained in that moment where Tom growls that he wanna be Jim Morrison. And it's like, okay, now I'm picking up like early proto shades of King of Limbs right now.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, let's get to the album.
Well, you know what, dude? I kind of am thinking, we've been talking for the better part of a couple hours, and I think that we need to give these songs their full due. I'm thinking we cut this into a 2-parter. What do you say?
I love it.
So listeners, as we are wont to do, sometimes when we talk about an album, it takes 2 or 3 episodes, and we're gonna allow ourselves that same flexibility on this season. These are dense records, so we don't want to rush anything here. If you have not been, I would urge you in the intervening week, please refamiliarize yourself with Tidal. If you're coming to it new. If you're coming to Fiona Apple new, honestly, I would say give yourself the treat of just starting at the beginning. That's not how I got into Fiona Apple necessarily, but I think that it's very rewarding in my mind to be able to follow her growth on a linear timeline. If you're already a big fan, which I'm sure a lot of you are, just give the album another listen or another few listens before we talk about it, because we're going to play the songs, but we're going to talk during them and stuff too. So what do you say, Zach? Should we just start a new episode?
Absolutely. I love that idea.
This has been great. I'm so ready to listen to the songs, and we will see you all next week on a Friday as we go through the tracks for Fiona Apple's debut album, Tidal. I have been Walker Glenn.
I'm Zach Glenn.
Talk to you soon, listeners. Bye. Idiotalk is a Glenn Brothers production. Get in touch with us at idiotalk.podcast@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at idiotalk.podcast. Thanks for listening to